Hello everyone, it's me, your average bonehead, Jay, and it's time to take another trip back to Canterlot High, as today we'll be finally taking a look at My Little Pony Equestria Girls 3, Friendship Games. Now, if you've seen my previous videos on the Equestria Girls Movies, or just read the title of the video, you'll probably know that Friendship Games is my favorite one, and I hope this review will explain why. One thing to note about this movie is that it's the first thing relating to Equestria Girls that has no influence from Equestria itself, meaning this entire movie is just about the human characters with the exception of Sunset Shimmer herself. It seems like this was done to see if this version of the cast could hold a story all on their own, and personally, I think they more than proved it, as this movie expertly concludes Sunset Shimmer's redemption arc. How does it do it? Well, without any further ado, let's get right into My Little Pony Equestria Girls 3, Friendship Games. Our story begins in the human world, at Canterlot High, where we are introduced to our main characters, Sunset Shimmer, Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy, Rarity, Applejack, and Rainbow Dash. Turns out Rainbow Dash called all of them here for an emergency, but it turns out her emergency was just her having a broken guitar string, as she wanted to play her guitar to pony up to impress the CMC. Oh, and before you ask, Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, and Scootaloo don't get a single line in this movie, they might as well not even be here. Which honestly, side note, I'm only realizing now that out of all of the My Little Pony movies, not a single one of them gave the show's main B squad anything to do. But anyways, the whole Rainbow Dash thing actually does connect to the plot, because this movie continues on the mystery from the last one of them trying to figure out how they pony up. As of now, they just assume it happens whenever they play their instruments, as Sunset Shimmer writes to Princess Twilight. But that is cut short as she ends up seeing someone messing around the portal to Equestria, using, okay, that's just a PKE meter. The person ends up running off before Sunset can confront them, and then they escape on a bus headed back to the city. As it turns out though, that person was the human world's version of Twilight Sparkle, as we see her head back to her school, Crystal Prep. Okay, that one's actually clever. As she heads back to her own private room, where we see that she has her own Pepe Sylvia board, as this world's Twilight is also trying to find out about the mysteries of Canterlot High. Which, you know, I'm gonna call BS on none of this stuff ending up on national news, but oh well, that doesn't matter. We have one of my favorite intro sequences in all of these movies. I think it does a good job of showing us not just our main protagonists, but our main antagonists as well. After the intro, we see that this world's Twilight, or as the fandom has dubbed her, Sci-Twi, which is what I'll call her, has built some sort of energy absorption device, which I'm perfectly sure won't be a problem for our main protagonists. Back at Canterlot High, Sunset Shimmer is still trying to figure out who was at the statue and why. Rainbow Dash correctly assumes that it was someone from Crystal Prep, but incorrectly assumes that they were there to sabotage. But the others believe Rainbow Dash, thinking that it would make sense that that would be the case, because it is almost time for the Friendship Games, an annual competition between Canterlot High and Crystal Prep that I honestly always wondered why it's called the Friendship Games, considering how literally everyone from both schools hate each other. It's also kind of weird to me that Sunset Shimmer doesn't truly understand the importance of the Friendship Games, considering how she was basically the queen bee of this school for like the last few years. But oh well, I guess we could chalk it up to her just not caring at the time. But the reason why the Friendship Games are important to Canterlot High is because they never won once. And this constant string of failure would naturally bring down the spirits of the students of Canterlot High, but luckily at their next school meeting, Rainbow Dash brings all their spirits up through, obviously, the miracle of song and dance, as we get our first proper song of the movie.
We'll always be wonderful forever, and now our time has finally arrived.
I actually really love this song. It's honestly one of my favorites from the movie, and even from the Equestria Girls movies in general.
It is we.
Which leads to one of my main reasons why I like Friendship Games the most. While Rainbow Rocks was consistent the whole way through, I personally find myself being more attached to the music from Friendship Games than I do the other two. Not saying any of those movies have bad songs, I'm just saying I like the ones from Friendship Games more. And this is one of them, as Rainbow Dash uses this song to remind the students that they've managed to conquer magical entities. A school competition shouldn't be anything to them.
We're not the school we were before. Yeah, we're different now. And we overcame the
And while this does in fact work, the bigger thing that happens is that Rainbow Dash, without playing her instrument, manages to pony up, which of course adds to the mystery of what really causes them to pony up. Vice Principal Luna obviously asks them to get a hold of their magic so that during the games, the school isn't accused of cheating, and therefore it's now up to Sunset Shimmer to truly solve this mystery. At the same time, we learn that the events of the friendship games are a mystery to both schools and are completely random, as to keep everyone on their toes and to give them all an equal playing field. Meanwhile, with Sunset Shimmer, she's at a loss of what to do and once again tries writing to Princess Twilight. Meanwhile, back at Crystal Prep, we see that Saitwai doesn't fit in with the whole cutthroat nature of the school, and she heads back to her private quarters, where we see this world's version of Spike. You know, this makes me wonder, what does this world's version of Smolder look like? And Saitwai confirms to Spike that the device she made can in fact track and absorb powerful energy, like I explained earlier. Basically, Saitwai's whole plan in this movie is that during the friendship games, she'll go to Canterlot High, not to compete, but instead to lurk around in the backgrounds and study all the weird energy signals that she's been seeing from that school, in order to use the information she gets so she can get herself into a private school where she won't have to worry about interacting with, well, anyone. Which basically means Saitwai is this movie's main antagonist. And I actually do like the idea of this world's Twilight being this movie's main threat. The main reason being is that Saitwai is a perfect mirror reflection to regular Twilight. If you all remember way back when, Twilight originally did not see the point of making friends. She would much rather just ignore people and continue on with her personal studies. Luckily, she got out of this mindset relatively quickly at an early state of her character development. However, Saitwai is the perfect mirror reflection of what would have happened to Twilight had she not gotten out of that mindset, as Saitwai basically doesn't know how to interact with other teens her age and always chooses to keep to herself and is easily pushed around by them, all in an effort to keep up with her studies. And technically speaking, the show already tapped into this with the character of Moon Dancer, but I think Friendship Games does this a bit better because the character literally is another version of Twilight. So yeah, I overall think that Saitwai actually works surprisingly well as this movie's antagonist. And on a side note, yes, I do think it's funny that the main thing they do to differentiate her from our Twilight and this world's Twilight is putting her hair up and giving her glasses. Which, you know, makes me wonder something. Do you think that regular Twilight also needs glasses and she just chooses not to wear them? You know what, that's my headcanon from now on. We then get introduced to this world's Cadence, who tells Saitwai that it's kinda weird that she wants to go to a school where she'll have a 0 chance of ever making friends. But Saitwai insists that this is truly what she wants, so much so that she even gets her own I Want song.
And I just haven't found it yet. I know there's more that's out there. Another me I haven't met.
The song is of course very good, and it's there to help express to the audience what Twilight truly wants. However, this song also shows why I kinda like the songs from Friendship Games more than the other ones, and that's because I think the songs are structured the best in this movie. This movie's musical numbers are structured more like a traditional Disney musical, with things like the opening ensemble number, the I Want song, a villain song, the whole works. And even more so, these songs actually progress the plot. Even though I like the songs from the original Equestria Girls, aside from Strange New World and the Cafeteria song, none of the other songs actually progress the plot. They're more so just there to play in the background during a montage. Half the time the characters aren't even actually singing them. As for Rainbow Rocks, while it has a lot more songs than Friendship Games, most of them also don't truly progress the plot. It's only the songs sung by the Dazzlings that actually have an effect on anything, and even then, they don't really express much about the characters. This is not me knocking any of the songs, I think they're all good. Hell, my favorite song of Rainbow Rocks doesn't even play in full in the movie. This is me just explaining why I like the songs from Friendship Games more. At least in context of this movie.
And I'm not saying that it's wrong, but I know there's more that's out there, 'cause I've been searching all along.
After Saitwai's song, we get introduced to, personally, the weakest part of the movie for me. Its main villain, Principal Cinch. And let me just clear something up quickly. Saitwai is this movie's main antagonist, albeit unintentionally, but Cinch is the main villain. And honestly, she's a very weak villain. Am I comparing her to the villains from the show? Hell no, that wouldn't be fair. I'm just gonna compare her to the previous Equestria Girls villains, and yeah, she's a weak one. Compared to the other two movies, the Dazzlings had magic and full influence over the students of Canterlot High, and Sunset Shimmer, while she didn't have magic, did hail from a place that had it, and also had some influence into how the students were acting when Twilight first arrived there. Cinch is just the generic uptight authority figure who wants Crystal Prep to win the friendship games because they have a reputation to uphold.
The important thing is that we are expected to win because Crystal Prep has a reputation.
She has a few good lines here and there, but other than that, she's a really generic villain for this type of movie. Honestly, if they were gonna go this angle, I would have made it so that instead of a new character, I would have just made it so that the principal of Crystal Prep would be a human version of King Sombra. Bro is already one of the most nothing entities in the main show. This would have given him at least something. It would have been better than White Diamond plastered over Yellow Diamond over here. Though I will admit, Cinch does have one thing in this movie that keeps her from being a complete F-tier villain. Oh, and on a side note, we also see this world's shining armor, which means this is the only My Little Pony movie where he actually appears and is mentioned. Cinch blackmails Sidetwi into competing in the friendship games by saying that she can easily get Sidetwi into her private school, but only if she competes and wins for Crystal Prep in the games. Which this will obviously throw a wrench in Sidetwi's plans to study the strange energy sightings from Canterlot High. Cinch wants Sidetwi to compete because there's usually academic portions in the friendship games, and Sidetwi is the smartest kid in school. Left with no other options, Sidetwi says yes and is now signed up to compete in the friendship games. Of course, taking her energy absorber and Spike with her. It is then, when getting onto the bus, where Sidetwi meets the rest of her team. Sour Sweet, Indigo Zap, Sunny Flare, Lemon Zest, and Sugarcoat. And my god, did they name these girls when they were hungry? They all have Pikmin fruit naming conventions. Lesser Mock Bottom. But seriously, the Shadow Bolts, what this team calls themselves, works as a pretty well group of baddies to go up against our main protagonists, the Wonder Colts, as they all have great designs and fun personalities. Some of them are even my favorite characters from the Equestria Girls spin-off in general. Ones like Sugarcoat are funny because she doesn't do that.
That was a really bad speech. You should consider not speaking in public. You are kind of being a doormat right now.
Sour Sweet's hilarious because her name perfectly explains how she can go from Bessie to bitch in 0.05 seconds.
You are such a sweetie! I am watching you.
And then there's Lemon Zest, who just has my favorite design of the bunch. I think she's just adorable. And I just love her rocker persona. Also, fun fact, she's the only one of the Shadow Bolts who was actually nice to Sidetwi. At least in her own way. Back at Canterlot High, we see Rainbow Dash, Applejack, and Rarity doing their usual bit.
I made a few options for uniforms. You really didn't have to do that. I know.
No, you really didn't have to.
I know!
As the Shadow Bolts arrive to the school, Sidetwi ends up getting separated from her group and enters Canterlot High, trying to figure out the source of all the strange energy. Of course, all the students of Canterlot High welcome Sidetwi with open arms, as they don't realize that this is not the Twilight they knew before. Sidetwi even bumps into and has a decently cute scene with, and say it with me now class, Pointless the character. After that though, we cut back to the Human 6, as Rarity ends up explaining that her favorite thing in the world to do is basically giving to her friends, which, displaying her element, generosity, is what causes her to pony up. And yeah, this basically ends up solving the mystery of what actually causes them to pony up. It's not when they play their instruments, it's when they display their element of harmony in its truest form. Generosity, laughter, kindness, honesty, and loyalty. Unfortunately, Sidetwi's device ends up detecting this strong energy signature and absorbs Rarity's magic right from her. But when Sidetwi appears, the group is obviously happy to see her, as they also don't know that she's not Pony Twilight until they see her with Principal Cinch and realize it's their world's Twilight. The Human 6 are of course upset to know that their world's Twilight goes to Crystal Prep of all places, but more importantly, Sunset Shimmer is frustrated as she has no idea how to solve the mystery of the sporadic magic all over the place, and she doesn't have Princess Twilight to help her. And this is why I feel like this movie works as the perfect conclusion to Sunset Shimmer's arc. Even though in Rainbow Rocks it can be argued that Sunset is the main character of that movie, Pony Twilight is still in it long enough and still has a big effect on the plot when working with our protagonists, while Sunset Shimmer herself plays more of a side role until the very end. In this one, it is directly Sunset's responsibility to figure out what's going on with all the magic. And unfortunately, this is putting a lot of stress onto her. I like this because usually this is Twilight's role. Twilight is usually the one who assumes the leader of this friend group, and is the one who has to solve all the problems. But since this world's Twilight is the movie's main antagonist, the role of group leader and problem solver now falls onto Sunset Shimmer. And it's very interesting to see how she handles this responsibility and how it improves her as the movie goes on, really showing that this movie is the perfect conclusion to her arc from once a main antagonist to now the main protagonist of this spin-off series. Anyway, Sunset Shimmer tries heading back to Equestria, but unfortunately, Sidetwi's device ends up absorbing Sunset Shimmer's magic right through the portal, which also absorbs the portal's magic, which means Sunset Shimmer cannot go back home, which, considering what was going down in Equestria at this time, I don't know what would have happened to Sunset Shimmer had she gone there. So she is forced to solve this problem on her own. Later in the gymnasium, the two schools look like they're already going to be at each other's throats, but Pinkie Pie, getting the help of Sidetwi and Vinyl Scratch, and using Pinkie's party cannons, managed to lighten the mood, spreading friendship and an actual truce between the two schools. Unfortunately, this is all ruined when Pinkie shows the true element of laughter, which causes Twilight's device to of course absorb her magic, which is also starting to spawn mini portals to different points of Equestria. Dangerous points of Equestria, that is. And then Principal Cinch comes and pulls the plug on this party, and stirs back up the flames between the two schools as she condescendingly says that Crystal Prep is going to win the games. But now, with all that build-up, it is finally time for the friendship games to begin, as we get our next musical number that serves as a montage for all the academic portions of the games.
How we gonna take you down? How we gonna take you down? How we gonna take you down?
And honestly, I love this sequence. Even though they do quickly go through the academic portions, the events they show are still funny, and the song itself is entertaining as it's basically both schools constantly throwing shade at one another.
We're not about to let you in, so get out of our way. Think you got us beat, but we're here to stay. Talk a little too much for a school that never wins. Maybe you should just stop before you even begin.
And the song itself also serves a greater purpose as we get a little solo moment for Sidetwi,
I can't wait till this is all over. There's so much more that's going on.
as well as a solo moment for Sunset Shimmer.
And before these games are over, I'll find out just what she's done.
The one thing I do find weird is that the judges for the friendship games are the principals of the schools. I don't know if that would be fair due to obvious biases. I personally think it would have been a better idea if they just used Miss Harshwinnie. But it doesn't matter. After all the academic rounds, the only contestants left are the main 6 of both schools. And once again, we get to see the differences between how Canterlot High treats its students and how Crystal Prep treats its students, as most of them don't even care about Sidetwi despite the fact that she just won for them. And we get another small moment with, obligated to say his name in these videos at least once, Flash Sentry, but Sidetwi brushes him off as her energy sensor is detecting more magic. She runs into Fluttershy, who takes notice that Sidetwi is feeling down, and Fluttershy offers to let her hug Angel to make her feel better, even though I don't know how anyone can feel better being around that demon. Sidetwi is of course confused to why Fluttershy is being so nice to her because they're supposed to be on different teams, but Fluttershy just likes being nice to people, and thus by displaying the element of kindness, it causes her to pony up, which of course causes Sidetwi's device to sap the magic from her. But while absorbing the magic, some small portals open up around the two of them, and Spike ends up chasing a creature through it, and after a bit of this he ends up getting infused with magic, which grants this world's Spike the dog the ability to...
I think so.
Naturally, Sidetwi is freaked out by the fact that her dog can talk now, but she pretty quickly accepts it, as she runs into Principal Cinch, who notices that since these girls are being nice to Sidetwi, that she spies on them to give Crystal Prep an edge, as it's almost time for the next round of the friendship games. Meanwhile, with the Human 6, Sunset Shimmer is still trying to figure out just what the heck is going on, and she's even lamenting over the fact that she can't go back to Equestria in order to get any help or answers. While discussing this though, they end up seeing that the next round of the Friendship Games is the relay race of obstacle coursing, archery, rollerblading, and motocrossing. These are teenagers. Man, this Friendship Game shit is serious. Principal Cinch assigns her teams while subtly threatening Twilight, and again, any scene with Cinch is only good based on the characters she's interacting with, not so much of her herself.
Twilight and Sour Sweet will start us off.
Well, that's just marvelous! If you want to lose before we even start.
Despite the admittedly far-fetched scenario, I actually really love this sequence, as it perfectly shows the different morality between Canterlot High and Crystal Prep. As when the race begins, even though Fluttershy has a slight disadvantage going up against Sour Sweet, she does manage to hit her target, allowing Applejack to perform her best Kagome impression. Meanwhile though, Saitwai isn't having the best time trying to win for her school, and Sour Sweet and even the other members of her team aren't giving her any form of help or even encouragement for that matter,
You're really bad at this!
which is causing Saitwai to buckle under all the pressure and screw up, which gives Canterlot High one heck of a lead. All this changes though when Applejack, displaying the element of honesty, actually goes and helps Saitwai, despite the Shadow Bolts not trusting her. And what do you know, because Applejack is honest with Saitwai, it allows her to hit the mark. Of course, though, displaying the element of honesty causes Saitwai's device to start absorbing Applejack's magic, which ends up causing even bigger problems because it ends up opening portals to Equestria, causing vines from the Everfree Forest to start attacking the arena, right when the motocross was beginning, which causes Sugarcoat to get knocked out the race, and causes Rainbow Dash to forfeit in order to save Sunset Shimmer, and allowing her to finish the race instead. Of course, this action of loyalty causes Rainbow Dash to pony up, and she ends up fighting back against the Audrey 2s, and now Principal Cinch notices the magic. And despite Canterlot High winning, the race is basically called off for all the interferences. Saitwai tries apologizing for what happened, but her pendant ends up accidentally once again absorbing Rainbow Dash's magic, and Sunset Shimmer calls her out on this, notably very aggressively. Though, I actually really like this because as it's very easy to tell that Sunset is venting her frustrations of how she doesn't know how to solve any of these problems and projecting them onto Saitwai.
Is there anything you do know? Like how to get our magic back? Or how to fix the portal to Equestria? You're supposed to be so smart, but did you ever think that you shouldn't be messing around with things you don't understand?
I mean, if it wasn't obvious. And this adds on to why I love this movie as the climax to Sunset Shimmer's arc. Principal Cinch of course sees more of this magic and accuses Canterlot High of cheating, demanding there to be a tiebreaker round with no magic. And it's at moments like these where Cadence, who has been here the whole movie and I just forgot to mention, is starting to see her boss's true colors. Sunset Shimmer apologizes to Celestia and Luna for messing up, as she feels awful for not being able to solve this mystery, and even more so for yelling at Saitwai. Principal Celestia insists that it's not Sunset's fault, but Sunset still believes it is her fault because she's the one who brought magic to this world. That night, it's time for the final round of the Friendship Games, as Sunset, still feeling awful for how she treated Saitwai earlier, decides that after this final round, she's going to make things right with her. But unfortunately, on the other side of things, Principal Cinch is insisting that since Canterlot High is going to quote-unquote cheat using magic, then that gives them free range to use magic themselves, as she ends up gaslighting Saitwai to use the magic that she has stored up via... Remember how I said that there was one thing that kept Cinch from being a complete garbage tier villain for me? Yeah, it's her villain song Unleash the Magic.
A chance like this won't come again. You'll regret not giving in. Isn't understanding magic worth the cost?
Unleash the Magic is such a good villain song, and I love how different it sounds from the rest of the music.
We only want what we deserve. That our school will clinch the win, and my legacy will endure.
This is honestly one of the best villain songs in all of My Little Pony in general. But then again, that's not really saying much since all the villain songs in this show are absolute top tier bangers. But don't let that discourage this one, as it's another one that belongs up there in the record books, and is honestly one of Principal Cinch's only good moments in this entire movie. Even if, once again, she's being carried by a bunch of teenagers.
Our only interest in this business is seeing Canterlot
Oh, I love this song. Anyways, it obviously works, and even though Spike tries to stop Sidetwi, she ends up unleashing the magic, which ends up giving her an evil transformation sequence, and thus the final boss fight of the movie can begin. Cinch runs away from the problem she created, and Sidetwi ends up opening portals all around to Equestria. Imagine being one of the ponies from Equestria during this whole thing. You and your friends are off minding your own business, then all of a sudden some random portal opens up out of nowhere, and you're face to face with some bizarro version of yourself. Would that be the freakiest thing you've ever seen, or just a typical Tuesday? I'll let you be the judge. Sidetwi ends up opening up a giant portal in the floor, which I just realized if any human actually fell into it, would they turn into a pony, or would they stay a human in Equestria? These are the questions I'm walking out with. Our heroes try saving the innocent, and the Shadow Bolts end up helping them, therefore giving them their last minute redemption that they'll end up going back on in one of the 44-minute specials in order to be redeemed again. Of course, as one would suspect though, even though the magic was drained from our main 6, the magic of friendship is something that could never be drained from someone, and Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy, Applejack, Rainbow Dash, and Rarity end up lending their magic to Sunset Shimmer, who gets her own Alicorn transformation and does battle with Sidetwi. And at first though, it looks like Sidetwi is winning until she sees Spike call out to her and realizes that by taking all this power, she'd be giving up her only true friend, and ends up giving Sunset Shimmer the opening she needs to eviscerate Sidetwi. Of course, the evisceration this time leads to Sidetwi actually being open to listen, to hear Sunset's apology, as well as listen to Sunset explain that she doesn't have to be the bad guy, and in fact, she can make a difference, she can make it right, she can make it better.
We don't have to fight.
Take my hand, Twilight. Let me show you there's another way. Just like someone once did for me.
And now with Sunset Shimmer being the one to convince a Twilight Sparkle of the magic of friendship, it means that her character arc from baddie to goodie has come full circle, as one can say now that Sunset Shimmer is fully redeemed and her character arc has come to a close. And I personally think it is beautiful. Sidetwi is obviously forgiven and a new ship is born, and honestly I actually kinda like this one. Principal Cinch gets rightfully called out by her own students.
At least they didn't manipulate Twilight into releasing all the stolen magic and turning into a power-crazed magical creature that tried to rip the world apart just to win a game.
I love you, Sugarcoat. She threatens to tell the school board on Canterlot High, but everyone points out how crazy she would sound by doing that.
That would never ruin your reputation.
And on top of that, she's surrounded by a bunch of teenage girls and a talking dog, so I don't think she can take them.
You Claude!
So Cinch is promptly fired, and Cadence becomes the new principal of Crystal Prep. And this adds to just another reason why I think Cinch should have just been human Sombra. It would have made this parallel all the more entertaining. Due to all the circumstances, this Friendship Games has decided to be seen as a tie, and the next day Sunset Shimmer finally puts together what's been causing the main 6 to pony up, as stated earlier, it being whenever they display their element of harmony. But in even bigger news, it turns out Sidetwi and Spike will be staying at Canterlot High, as Sidetwi transferred schools to stay with her newfound friends. And the movie ends on that note. But we do get a post-credit scene where we finally see our Twilight again, who finally got all of Sunset Shimmer's messages and quickly rushed through the portal in order to help, because as it turns out, she was held up because she was dealing with a psychotic cult leader turned time-traveling terrorist who only got that way because she chose to never write to her best friend. I swear, I really like Starlight Glimmer, as both Twilights finally get to meet.
The second strangest.
Though don't worry, this won't be the only time, as the movie now truly ends on that note. Yeah, could you tell I love this one? Friendship Games is by far my favorite of the Equestria Girls movies, even if it is technically being carried by the songs and the ending, but the other stuff are great too. The movie is of course funny, it has a decent story, all the characters, both old and new, are all fun and enjoyable, most of them, and the arcs of our main leads are great. Sidetwi being a mirror reflection to regular Twilight is always interesting to me, and I adore Sunset Shimmer's character arc throughout all of these movies, and I think it peaks here. She really does have one of my favorite arcs of villain that everyone hates to hero that everyone loves and actually manages just to save the day. And throughout these movies, it's so interesting to see her overcome all the obstacles and make her way to main protagonist status. Sunset Shimmer really is just that good of a character for me, and I hope going through this trilogy with me helped you all see why. But overall, I just adore Friendship Games for that reason. It is, in my eyes, the best Equestria Girls movie. But it's not my favorite My Little Pony movie. But before we can get to that one, we have one other Equestria Girls movie to get through. The last one. So, will this one be a great finish, or will it end the Equestria Girls spin-off on a sour note? Honestly though, I don't care. What I do care for is the fact that this trilogy of movies is, in my eyes, for what they needed to be, nearly perfect. Now, I'm your average bonehead Jay, and I wish you all good night.
It is we who survive at the end of the day. It is we who survive.
Oh, you're still here. Well, since you stuck around for this long, you might as well like and subscribe. Comment if you're feeling really daring. And while you're at it, you might as well follow me on Twitter and Instagram at jayskeletyn. Links down below. And if you just want to see more, you can check out the playlists or look at my last video. Now thanks for watching, and if you need me, I'm going back to bed